Hi guys, welcome to the video review for the Feiyu-Tech G4 3-axis handheld gimbal. Now before we dive into the actual review itself, I'll just tell you a bit about the format of the video that's coming up. First and foremost, I'm going to talk a bit about the gimbal. I'm going to go over some of the design features, some of the changes that have been made since the G3 Ultra. I'm also going to do some test footage which is going to come right at the end of this video, which will give you an opportunity to see some of the stabilisation out in the real world. If you want to look at that now, by all means look under this video and you will see in the comments there'll be a link and that will take you straight to that footage. There's going to be a couple of extra videos inside the review just to show you some of the initialization, and I am going to actually run some of the modes in front of the camera so you can get an idea for the new modes and the way they differ from the G3 Ultra. So with that in mind, let's just dive in and let's get talking about the G4 itself. Feiyu-Tech's announcement of the G4 has come as a bit of a surprise to many people, including myself, as the G3 Ultra handheld gimbal only came out probably about 4 or 5 months ago, which is a very short time when considering the product. Both the G4 and the G3 Ultra are 3-axis handheld gimbals, both of which are designed to house a GoPro Hero 3, GoPro Hero 3 Plus or a GoPro Hero 4. Feiyu-Tech, however, have with the G4 addressed a problem that's been plaguing all of their gimbals, and to be fair, it's not really their gimbals that have had the problem, except they could have done something about this a little bit earlier in my opinion. The biggest issue with the Hero cameras is the fact that you can't easily see the output. The Hero 3, the Hero 3 Plus and the Hero 4 have always had the option of adding an additional backpack with an LCD display. Indeed, the Hero 4 with the black edition doesn't come with an included screen, nor does any of the Hero 3 cameras. The only camera that's recently come out that actually has a built-in display so you can see what's coming out of the camera instantly is the Hero 4 Silver, which I happen to have in my gimbal right now. As you can see with the G4, the major difference is the fact that they've built in a C bracket and removed the IMU from this bracket, which allows you a clear sight of the touchscreen display. This, for filming using this gimbal, makes things much different than the G3 Ultra, where you couldn't actually see the footage. While you could use the Hero Silver on the G3 Ultra, it was completely obliterated by the main cradle and wasn't really any use anyway. Other options for the older cameras were to use the Wi-Fi app with a phone. However, if you had a Hero 3 camera, the delay was so bad that it was barely even worth using. If you had the Hero 3 Plus or if you have the Hero 4 Black, you do have the option of using the Wi-Fi and the delay is much better. However, once again, you've got to lug around a phone. Feiyu-Tech unfortunately never really got this problem. The fact that there has been this LCD display available meant that for a long time now I feel they probably should have been producing gimbals that would encapsulate the use of an extra display. Now that's very easy for me to say, however what you've got to bear in mind with the technology behind a brushless gimbal is it really all comes down to balance. Most brushless gimbals are designed around the weight of the camera, the dimensions of the camera and the balance itself, as have all of the Feiyu-Tech gimbals in the past. However, Feiyu-Tech on this gimbal have announced that you can not only use your Hero 4 Silver, but you can also use your Hero camera with the additional backpack. Now unfortunately I can't demonstrate this for you on this sample model because the thumb screws that have been provided aren't the elongated ones that will come with the final production model, I believe. It's a fairly simple design. All you do is you basically put your backpack on your camera, you use the longer screws, it connects and it will work fine. I will actually show a demonstration of this, and all I'm going to do is use a bit of Velcro wrapped around to hold it to the gimbal, but with the backpack on it to show you that the motors will actually cope with the load. Now, my opinion is these motors have always been capable of coping with the load, as Feiyu-Tech have always produced handheld gimbals with very, very solid motors. Indeed, their aircraft motors have been the same, and they've also been very good. The main problem, of course, is that while you could use your backpack on some of the other gimbals if you used your own kind of elastic band method, the major issue was the fact that you couldn't actually see out of the LCD display because there was an IMU slap bang in the middle of it. In fact, if I just grab the G3 Ultra, I can show you the problem right there. So if this had a screen on it, you can see there's an IMU and there's a big cage. So you'd need a whole new bracket, and because the IMU is mounted to it, you'd also have to have mounting points on this bracket to be able to actually house your IMU and make sure it's 100% straight. This is one of the major selling points of the G4 in my opinion, is the fact that you can now use a handheld gimbal designed for the GoPro, and you can actually use it with an LCD display and see what you're filming. Other design features that are worthy of noting is the fact that Feiyu-Tech have now found a way of making a completely wireless free design. For those of you who have already seen my unboxing video, and if you haven't it's worthwhile having a look, I basically show the comparison between the G3 Ultra, which has wires coming out of all the motors, and the G4, which as you can see has completely encapsulated wiring running down these channels. There's a slight rubber, almost felt feel to these little panels, and they can actually be removed if you peel them up, but they're just self-adhesive. However, what this does give you the ability of doing is transporting this gimbal with relative ease and not having to worry about your wires getting snagged. That for me again is a major selling point, because I've often found myself throwing my gimbal straight into a very busy camera bag and things get snagged on those wires. The G3 Ultra came in at about 430 grams with the camera included. The G4 comes down to 392 grams with the camera included. Now where's all that extra weight gone? Well, the answer to the question is the bottom of it. Again, if you have a look at my unboxing video, you'll see I do some measurements, and you'll also notice the fact that I mentioned that there is only 2 batteries included. The G4 now only uses 2 of its included batteries, however it comes with 4. One of the constant frustrations that I found with the initial G3 Ultra was the fact that it came with 4 batteries, however it used 3. That meant you could charge 2, put them in the gimbal, couldn't use the gimbal, you then had to charge the other 2, but then you'd only use one of those 2, and then you'd never have a spare set lying around. With the G4 you are supplied with 4, you are supplied with a charger that can cope with 2, so that means you can charge all batteries, and it means you've got a full set ready to use should you want to actually add an additional pack into it if it runs out. Obviously battery life is a good question, and that's something that I'm going to do in another video after these, where I do a time lapse between the two to see whether the G3 Ultra or the G4 last the longest, and obviously how long it will actually last. It's not going to be a real world test because I'm not going to be able to sit there for 2 or 3 hours twiddling it around and actually using it. However, it should be at least a good indication to see what the difference is between the 2 battery setups. When talking about batteries, the other thing that's worth noting is that on the back panel of the G4 is this little port here. This is designed to be able to power your Hero 4 camera directly from the gimbal battery. Indeed, Feiyu-Tech have recently released a video suggesting that you can actually remove the battery from your Hero 4 and power the camera directly from it. Now while that is an interesting function, I have to admit from my own point of view I don't really see that anyone's going to use it. The only reason that you'd want external power going to your camera from another source is if you were going to be using it for a long time, but of course if you're only going to be using it from the power of this gimbal and it's only got 2 batteries, ultimately you're not going to get a great deal of extra power out of it. The only thing that I could see that being of advantage to is if you suddenly found that your battery in your Hero 4 is dying, you can then pull that lead out and you can give it a little bit of a boost from it to be able to charge it up slightly. However, again, you've got to bear in mind that what comes out of your gimbal will always come out from both devices, and that means you could find that your gimbal runs out much quicker. One other design feature that has changed is the fact that the motors and the motor housings are slightly smaller in diameter. They've also lost the little portal that gave you the LED. Now again, this was mentioned in my unboxing video, but basically there is a little hole in the bottom motor which is now your indication light. That indication light tells you when you're doing firmware updates whether or not connections are made, and it also tells you whilst you're using it in regular usage the battery life left in your gimbal. So if it's flashing quickly, I believe it means that you're running out of battery. Not the most convenient of spots, because obviously to be able to see it you've got to make sure that you yaw your camera down and can see it, and you don't really want to turn it on when it's in this attitude if possible, because it might throw your IMUs out. The one final feature from the design, other than a little rubber cap that is over the USB port there, is the fact that you now get included with the G4 the threaded switch at the bottom. when the G3 Ultra came out, one of the additional features that came out a few months after it was the addition of the carbon fibre extension pole shown here. All it is a nice lightweight carbon fibre pole with a thread at the top, completely hollow, and then another thread at the bottom. The idea is that you can join more than one of these poles together and you can then use it for extended reach. What you would have to do, however, is you would have to purchase an additional switch which had the standard switch, single click switch as came with the gimbal, but would screw in the bottom and actually had the threads. This switch is included with the G4, so you don't actually have to buy that, you just have to buy the poles. And I have to admit, in my test footage, as you'll see, I do use the poles and they are actually quite useful. I only have one, but I could see there being good use for a couple of them to get some really interesting shots. So what else has changed between the G3 Ultra and the G4? Well, there's a number of little functionality changes which I'll show you in a moment involving the modes, but one thing that I'll show you right now is a little video showing the initialization times. As you can see, the initialization time of the G4 is much quicker than the G3 Ultra. While that isn't exactly a long time on the G3 Ultra, it is worth bearing in mind that for every moment you're holding your gimbal whilst it initializes, there is the opportunity for you to knock it around a little bit, which will cause your IMU to be slightly out of kilter. That can translate into a very, very soft and gentle panning or rolling problem whilst you're filming, or you can find your horizon slightly out of whack. Both gimbals are still designed to be left very stable when you power it on, which is a little bit awkward unless you have a completely flat table. However, personally, I've never found a problem with just holding it completely still, turning it on, and then just using it. So next thing, let's just zoom out of here and let's have a look at the modes, how they work and how they differ between the G4 and the G3 Ultra. So first and foremost, let's power the gimbal on. And there we go, so we're immediately into mode 1. How do we know it's mode 1? Well, we've got the same single push button on the back as the G3 Ultra, which flashes once every few seconds, suggesting it's in mode 1. As you can see, if I tap on the back of here, we have a completely viewable screen. Obviously, if you're standing right behind it, you're going to have a motor in the way. However, fundamentally, you can see everything that you're filming in front of you. You can see flashing away on the bottom here, if I just tilt it backwards slightly. In here, there's that little LED, which is the battery indicator whilst you're filming. So we are currently in mode 1. Now let's say we were walking along and we're in mode 1. It means that if I move myself and you're to the left or to the right, the camera will pick it up and it will do a nice steady motion. The speed in which it pans can be adjusted by the software, just as it was with the G3 Ultra. So you can decide to have a really slow yaw around, or you can have a really fast one. If you'd like to see a demonstration of that on the G3 Ultra, I have a video for it, and the link is below. So let's say we walk up to the edge of a bridge and we want to see what's underneath it. We come to it and we pull forward. Oh, hang on, no, it's keeping a completely flat horizon. This is where mode 2 comes in handy. So to get to mode 2, we simply click the button, 1, 2, and now we've still got that nice horizon lock, we've got a nice steady motion. However, when we tilt forward, the gimbal recognises the fact that we're tilting forward and it adjusts the camera. Now that in itself is not different from the G3 Ultra. Let's say we got to a point where there's a 45-degree angle, so we want to face down, but what we don't want to do is we don't want it now to move anymore if we tilt backwards. All we do is we now, in mode 2, click once, and what that now does is it moves it back into mode 1, however, the tilt of the camera, as you can see, is completely fixed, thus leaving us with that same 45-degree angle. You can still pan around at 45 degrees, but it is fixed in place. Should we want to get it back up, all we've got to do is double tap again. It recognises that we're now at a 90-degree angle, and we're back in mode 2 where we can lean forward and it recognises a lean forward. If we want it to be perfectly level again, we just tap once, and now we've gone back into mode 1, again indicated by the flashing single there. So just like the G3 Ultra, you've also got mode 3, which is a fixed completely. So let's say we went over and we said we want to have the camera point this way permanently. All we do is we hold the back button for 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, take the finger off. The light is now completely solid, you can't really see it, but you can see the reflection on my hand, and now that camera is pointing in one fixed point in space no matter what I do with the gimbal. So if I move it back, you can see no matter where I go, as long as I'm within the constraints of the motors, it will continue pointing in that one fixed point in space. All good. However, what happens if we were standing at that bridge again, and I'll just bring it into mode 1 again, and we wanted it to be looking down and we wanted that similar functionality? Well, what we can do is we can do another sort of blended mode where we say double tap, we walk to the edge of the bridge, we look down at that 45-degree angle, and we say, well, there's something down there that I just want to fixate on. So now what we do is, whilst we're in mode 2, we hold the button down, come off it again. Now we are in that fixed mode, but the tilt is completely fixed. So once again, the camera is now fixated on one point in space down there, no matter what we do with it, even if we put the motor in the way of it, if we twist it around, if we try and yaw, that camera will stay pointing in that direction. Single click comes out of it, double tap and we can get our horizon back. Okay, so they're the basic functions. There's one function that is still to be tested here, which is, let's say we wanted to have a nice low shot and we wanted the camera to be upside down. Obviously there's one option. We could do this, so we can just drift along with this, scooting along the floor. However, one problem with that, of course, is that this motor is going to be completely in the way. We don't want that. So what we can do is we can actually say, well, you know what, I would like it in upside down mode. Tap, tap, tap. 1, 2, 3, and the camera will immediately swing itself right round, get itself out of the way of that motor. Now obviously there's one drawback to that, which if you were filming originally in this mode and then you swip it round, your camera is going to be upside down. You're going to have to do some post editing. The alternative, of course, is that because we can get to the touchscreen on this, we could change the mode so the Hero is actually filming in upside down mode, so the footage would be the right way round. The idea though is that you can do it nice and quickly. Tap, tap, tap. Again, camera now comes round and self levels itself out when it recognises it. If we do it in this way round, tap, 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 and again it hits the constraints of the motor bounds and it wants to be turned upside down. Now this, plus the addition of a pole, is fantastic if you want to do some really nice low slung shots, and some of those shots you'll see in my review footage coming up in a minute. So anyway, they are the basic modes in operation. I'm just going to bring it back out of that again. 1, 2, 3, spin it around. The other thing that's worth showing is that this is a Feiyu-Tech gimbal, and because of that we can give it a fair amount of abuse without it complaining too much. This is not something I recommend to everyone to do, but it really is nice and solid, and as you can see it's not glitching out, it's not trying to roll its horizon. The other thing to mention, out of the box you may find that your horizon or one of your roll axis is slightly off and needs to be moved. There is software available, same as the G3 Ultra software, that will give you the ability of actually tweaking out ever so slight adjustments in the IMU. I have to admit this one came out of the box and the horizon had an ever so slight lean to it. I plugged it into the G3 Ultra software and the software settings and it worked absolutely fine, and I was able to actually tweak that out. There's a video on my channel showing you how to do that if you do need to do it. But it is a nice feature because sometimes if they just put a tiny tolerance level out in the IMU, then you'll find that you've got a slight horizon problem or a slight roll problem. However, for the most part, as far as I can see, this gimbal does not glitch out anything like the original ones. The G3 Ultra was not bad, but the G3 Ultra wasn't perfect. The one thing that you will notice, and it's something that does come up as a common comment on my YouTube videos, is that when you're in this mode with your handle parallel to the ground. If you rotate your handle round, you'll see nothing happens. However, if you now pan around slightly, and now you bring your handle back level, you'll find it immediately will yaw around. Now, many people understand this as being a glitch, and there is always that point where when you bring your camera down, it will twitch. So you can see there, bring it down, twitch, up, no twitch, bring it down, twitch. That is not a fault of the gimbal. All it's trying to work out is the fact that when you're in this mode, it's saying, okay, I'm in this mode, the rotation of this handle makes no difference to me. When you get to a certain point, it has to say the rotation of this handle is now controlling my left and right yaw. So actually, the perfect way of doing it, if you want a nice smooth transition from here downwards, you have to make sure that there is a complete straight line between here and the axis of the motor, and you shouldn't see any twitch at all. But bear that in mind, it's something that comes up as a common problem, and believe me, while you can talk to Feiyu-Tech as much as you want about it, it's purely the fact that at some point in time it has to recognise the difference between using and not using this rotational axis on this motor and coming down here and actually using it for the ability to recognise pan. So that's the modes explained and demonstrated. I'll just pop that down there. So we've looked at the details, we've looked at the differences between the G3 Ultra and the G4. I've shown you some of the new modes and the way they work in front of a camera. Now what I'll do is answer a couple of questions which are likely to come up in the future on the comments. The first question I'm likely to get is, I own a G3 Ultra, is it worth the money upgrading? That is a tough one to answer. From my point of view, I was very happy with my G3 Ultra. I did find it a little frustrating that I couldn't see what the output from the camera was. I did find in times with my Hero 4 camera, because it was a faster Wi-Fi link, that I would pull my mobile phone out and I would link between the two of them. There have been rumours from Feiyu-Tech that they may even be coming out with a clip that will mount a mobile phone onto it, so you can clamp it onto your gimbal. However, that's not really been substantiated yet, and to be honest, that's still a little bit cumbersome because you've got to use the Wi-Fi mode, and the Wi-Fi mode absolutely rinses your battery. If you don't own one of these gimbals already and you're thinking of buying a 3-axis, I would say definitely buy the G4. Pound for pound, this is going to last you much longer than something like the G3, purely for the fact that it ticks a lot more of the boxes and the fact that you can see your own shots. You get the 2 batteries rather than the 3 batteries, which means you don't have to buy additional batteries to have a spare. Initialization is much quicker. Basically, all of the little things just add up to suggest that this is a better gimbal all round. All that said, the G3 Ultra is still a fantastic gimbal. It still holds stabilisation almost exactly the same as the G4. I've done some side-by-side tests, and to be honest, they were so identical I didn't even bother putting them online. Obviously, I'm on the latest version of the firmware for the G3 Ultra. I'm on the first version of the firmware for the G4. There are likely to be future improvements at some point that will come in place, and it may be a case of the G4 will suddenly become a much more outright competitor in regards of stabilisation. So that's about it for the actual review of this gimbal. Like I say, from my point of view, I would say that this is by far and away Feiyu-Tech's best gimbal yet. Certainly from a handheld point of view, this is definitely an outstanding gimbal, well worth the money in my opinion. It's not a cheap gimbal, however, with the accessories like the pole and things like that, it's something that you'll just put in your camera bag, you'll have it available, and you'll find yourself using it much more than you thought you would do, and it can be a lot of fun. Build quality is excellent, resilience is excellent, and in a moment you're going to see the test footage from it. One thing that I would say is, as you're watching that test footage, one thing to look out for is the test footage from the car. I actually hold this thing out of a car window at 60 miles an hour facing forward, and it doesn't even flinch whatsoever, and that is a testament to these gimbals. Anyone who's watching this who's come from a radio controlled aircraft background and has used one of the aero gimbals will know that things like the DJI Zenmousse gimbals, while fantastic gimbals at stabilising, they have very weak motors. if you blow on them too hard, or if you push certainly some air resistance on them, you will find that they will trip out, whereas these Feiyu-Tech gimbals really do stand up to the test. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful to everyone. If you've got any questions, if you'd like to see more footage, then please ask away. Likewise, keep an eye out on my channel, and I will be updating some videos, and I'll do some more testing.